The deadliest mass shooting by a single person in Ohio happened back on March 30th, 1975, nearly 50 years ago. Before the end of that day, 11 members of the same family would lay dead in Hamilton. James Urban Ruppert had a rough childhood, as many do. He was the second child in the family, and his mother, Charity Ruppert, would openly tell him that she wanted a daughter instead of him. His father, Leonard, was a mean man with a violent temper who showed no affection for his sons. Leonard died at just 37 from TB when James was only 12. His elder brother, Leonard Jr., was 14 and became sort of the father figure in the family. Leonard Jr. apparently picked on James constantly. It made young James so unhappy that he ran away and tried to hang himself when he was 16. When that didn't work, he returned home to the taunting. He wasn't a big man, 5'6" and just over 130 pounds. People who knew him would say he was quiet, an unremarkable man who was modest and bookish, but helpful. He got all the way to the age of 41 without once getting into trouble with the law. He had gone to college but dropped out. He trained as a draftsman, wasn't working in 1975. He was unmarried and unemployed and living with his mother that year. She was not kind to him, threatening to evict him because he couldn't hold down a job and was always drinking. Leonard Jr., on the other hand, had done pretty well for himself. He finished college with a degree in electrical engineering. He was married to a girl that James had once dated. He owned his own house and he had 8 kids. The year before, James had lost all of the small amount of money he had in the stock market crash. He owed both his mother and his brother money. James was depressed and frustrated and angry. At the end of February 1975, he purchased some ammunition for the weapons he owned, and he asked the clerk about silencers. And then on his birthday, on March the 29th, he went down to the Great Miami River with his .22 pistol and his .22 rifle, and he went target shooting, lining up the tin cans. Witnesses would see him there. By this day, James's mental health had cycled down, and his behavior was only getting worse. He went to a bar that night, the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge. He went out every night, drank beer every night. It was one of the things James and his mother fought about. If he could buy beer daily, then he could pay rent, she would tell him. James would vent some of his frustration to a bar employee, Wanda Bishop. Later on, she would tell authorities and a court that James was frustrated and complaining about his mother. He told her that he needed to solve the problem. James left the bar around 11 p.m., but he came back. She asked him, "Did you solve the problem?" And he told her, "No, not yet." He stayed until closing at 2:30 in the morning. The day after James's birthday, March 30th, was Easter Sunday that year. It was a traditional type of celebration for the Ruppert family. There was an Easter egg hunt out on the lawn for the Ruppert children, who were aged 4 to 17. All of them were there at Charity's house. Charity, the kids, Leonard Jr., and his wife Alma, and James, who stayed upstairs sleeping off the night of drinking. By afternoon, Charity was in the kitchen with Leonard Jr. and Alma. They were making up a mess of sloppy joes, which was a very popular dish at the time. Most of the kids were in the living room, playing and waiting on food to be served. It was somewhere around 4 p.m. James got up and loaded 4 weapons, a .357 Magnum, 2 .22 handguns, and his rifle. And then he headed down the stairs. Leonard Jr. would fall first with a shot to the head, and then sister-in-law Alma. Charity then lunged for James, trying to stop him, but he shot her and she fell in the kitchen. The next to go down were 3 of the kids, David, 11, Teresa, 9, and Carol, 13. James left the kitchen and walked into the living room, where Anne, 12, Leonard III, 17, Michael, 16, Thomas, 15, and John, 4, were all killed. James then shot each person a second time, just to be sure they didn't get up again. By the time all of this was done, only 5 minutes had passed. James would spend the next 3 hours in the house, but he would eventually call the police. There's been a shooting, he told them. Then he stood and waited inside the front door for authorities to arrive. He confessed nothing. He did not cooperate, and he repeatedly told authorities that he was insane and he would plead insane. Behind him in the house, blood had pooled so thick that it was seeping through the floorboards and into the basement. He left his weapons on scene, and authorities would find that James fired 44 rounds in total. At his first trial, a 3-judge panel found him guilty of 11 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life on July 3, 1975. But there was a mistrial declared, and a new trial would begin just 20 days later. Justice was speedy for James in the day. He was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences at trial number 2. But there would be a third trial, and this time his defense attorney would personally hire psychiatrists and psychologists, convinced that his client must be insane. At his third and final trial in 1982, he would be found guilty for 2 counts of first-degree murder. Those counts were for his brother and his mom. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity for the other 9 lives he took. He received consecutive life sentences and was imprisoned at various prisons and then at a medical center, unit of corrections in Columbus, where he would die in 2022, aged 88, of natural causes. He had his first shot at parole 20 years after the massacre in 1995. He was denied. He was also denied in 2005 and 2015. Up to 2015, he had refused all recommended programming and had built up a record of bad conduct. He had done nothing to convince a parole board that he could be released. The house was cleaned and recarpeted, its contents auctioned off. It was rented to a family new to Hamilton, a family who had no idea a massacre had happened there. But they would leave, claiming that they heard voices and other noises they couldn't explain. The house stands to this day still occupied. Stains on the floor joists are all that is left of that horrific Easter Sunday, 49 years ago. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.